Welcome to Crime Beat. I'm Anthony Robart. Tonight, a young woman doesn't come home after a night out with friends.
Something is wrong. I have a gut feeling now that something is going on.
It's my belief that this was very much a premeditated murder.
There was nothing really that would have indicated that things would go that far.
I get like shock. It's like I cannot talk. It's like, what's happened, why, what the reason, and how the way she died. It's like we get shocked completely.
Anytime you have someone who's staring at life in prison on the run with a high-powered rifle, that's about as high threat a situation as you're going to have. I'd never been involved in a manhunt that was that volatile.
Current speed's just under 150 kilometers an hour.
And that high danger.
He turned and started shooting at us like right away. There was no pause, no delay.
I remember feeling the concussions from his barrel, like pow, and you feel it.
A big guy ran over and grabbed me while the bullets were still flying to pick me up.
Here now is Nancy Hixt with Obsessed, the story of Nadia El-Dib.
Each day, these two senior RCMP officers go to work hoping their own lives won't be put on the line.
We kind of trick ourselves into believing that we're going to be fine all the time. You couldn't do the job if you're always worried about getting hurt.
March 29th, 2018 started out like any other, and then
20 kilometers an hour. He is stopped. We're approaching.
The details of that day never go away. Never. Never.
Cleared air, 1033. Officer hit. Suspects down. We need ambulances here right away.
It felt like very surreal. Like people are like, oh, I'd probably know what it's like, you know, from movies and video games. No, not until you're actually in it. Then it's a completely different ball game. All I saw was his body hanging out of the driver's door and his left arm was swinging. It was just dangling. And I could see the hole in the back of his head and just blood going all over the side of his patrol car door.
350 kilometers south of where the shooting happened, a murder investigation was unfolding in Calgary.
We received a 911 call from a female middle-aged female that had left her residence in the morning and found the body of a young female in her early 20s with severe trauma to the body, dead.
Detective Colm Cavilla was assigned as the primary investigator with the Calgary Police Homicide Unit. The body was found in a backyard of a home in the community of Marlborough Park in northeast Calgary. Police said the woman was likely dead for hours before anyone called for help.
Neighborhood canvas reveals that, in fact, in the early hours of the morning, people did hear a young lady screaming, and they did hear gunshots, but we were never called.
What stood out to investigators was the amount of violence used.
The injuries were severe. This young lady had been stabbed more than 40 times. Her throat had been slit and she had been shot twice.
At the same time across town, a family was frantically searching for their missing loved one.
And my mom started blowing up my phone like, hey, you know, can you check in on Nadia? Like, can you check her room? Is she home? So I go upstairs, I check Nadia's room, she's not there, and I'm like, Mom, what's going on? And she says, well, Nadia never came home, so I wanted to see if maybe she eventually did. And I was like, Mom, it's fine. She's probably sleeping over at her friend's house. So I'm calling the friends, not getting any answers, and I'm, again, in my head, I'm just like, no, don't freak out. It's fine, she's at her friend's house, everything is good. So I go to the friend's house, and she had friends, like they were two sisters. And I'm like banging on the door, and I'm just, because what I expected to happen is I would see Nadia's car like parked in front of their house, because that means like she slept over. But I don't see it, and then I start freaking out. So I'm banging on the door, their mom opens it up, and I'm like, hey, like I'm Nadia's sister, she never came home, is she here? And then she says, no, she's not here. And I'm like, okay, well, can you wake up the girls, because I need to talk to them about why Nadia never came home. And I'm in the living room, and I just like burst into tears, because at that point I'm like, something is wrong. Like this, I have a gut feeling now that something is going on.
Coming up, as Nadia's family continues their search, detectives were still trying to identify the victim of the violent homicide. Welcome back to Crime Beat. The search for Nadia leads her family to make a heart-wrenching discovery. We now return to Nancy Hicks with Obsessed, the story of Nadia El-Dib.
Nadia El-Dib was known for her bubbly personality. She loved to sing and dance.
She was really funny, she was very outgoing. She was the baby of the family too for the longest time, until the youngest sibling was born. So she was a little bit, you know, somebody who was the spoiled younger sibling for sure.
Her parents immigrated to Canada from Lebanon in 1991. Nadia is the third youngest of 4 El-Dib children. In 2018, she was 22 years old and studying to become a legal assistant, with dreams of one day becoming a lawyer.
She was definitely like somebody who just loved to get people's perspective, but she was very like progressive. She was very open-minded. She was very like women's rights, LGBTQ plus rights, and especially she was somebody who was a lot darker compared to like my siblings and I. So she was very clearly Middle Eastern looking. So she was also very like fighting for people of color. She was just somebody for sure that stood out with her features, and I would say experienced things differently than the rest of my siblings when it came to like racism. So she spoke out a lot about those things. So she was very much, wanted to fight for people's rights.
Her career path could easily have taken another direction. Her passion was doing makeup.
You can see picture of her when she's so young. It's like she have full makeup, like artist.
Nadia was very well known as the Kim Kardashian of the family. She had the beautiful long black hair, the dark features. She had amazing taste in fashion, and she did her makeup like immaculate. What she did in makeup back then is kind of what's trending now. So she was like a bit of ahead of her time.
Nadia also loved shisha.
She's always, when I coming home, she's making the shisha. She say, "Oh, I'm waiting for you. Just come over." She's like, "Ready? Just get your shower. It will be ready for you in 5 minutes."
It's quite cultural, and it's a place where people gather to hang out, and it's flavored tobacco. There's a lot of shisha bars in Calgary, and she liked to go to them because shisha bars mostly have people like Middle Eastern people who go and hang out. So it was also her way of meeting friends and just random people. So it was mostly her hangout place, going to shisha bars.
On Saturday, March 24th, 2018, a day before she went missing, Nadia took a welcomed break from studying to meet up with friends at a downtown shisha bar. The next morning, her family planned to have their regular Sunday brunch at the El-Dib home. But when no one heard from Nadia, they started to worry. Rasha headed to Nadia's friend's house, the ones she was out with the night before.
So the sisters end up waking up, and they come and sit down, and I explain to them Nadia never came home. I don't know what's going on. So that's where they disclosed to me about like Nadia had left with Adam at one point during the night, and then Nadia had called one of the girls at, I think it was like 3:30 a.m. Just the phone call was Nadia just saying, hey, like, Adam's driving, like, he's not taking me back to my car. Can you please talk to him because my family's gonna get worried. I need to get home. And that was the last of the conversation.
Rasha was aware that Nadia had gone on a few dates with someone named Adam the previous summer.
So Nadia was very, very secretive and very private. It was really hard to get information out of her. So that summer, I was creeping her Twitter, and it was very much like those very sappy, heartbreaking tweets of just like, oh my goodness, like, I really like this person and yada, yada, yada. So I asked her, I was like, hey, like, you know, do you want to, like, let me know? Are you seeing anybody? Is it serious? And so she told me that she had started seeing somebody, so it wasn't really serious, but there was somebody that she liked and they were talking. They had gone out on a few dates. Then again, like a few months later, I was like, Nadia, like, are you still seeing this person? And she said, no, like, I'm not involved with him anymore. And I asked her why, and then she said, well, he just, like, he tells me what to wear, and he's like a little bit more controlling. She just decided to break things off with him, no longer see him, and just decided that, like, they were going their separate ways.
After they stopped seeing each other in 2017, Adam left town and got work in the oil patch in northern Alberta. But friends said he recently returned to Calgary. That morning, Adam wasn't answering his phone. Rasha and her sister's two friends retraced Nadia's steps.
So we started out at the shisha bar, and her car was in the back alley. So again, red flag. I'm like, first of all, her overnight bag is in there. Her stuff is in there, other than her purse. So I'm thinking, like, this is odd. Like, why would her car still be here?
They also tracked down one of Adam's friends.
Adam found out her whereabouts. He borrowed his friend's car, being like, hey, I'm gonna come right back, don't worry about it. He goes to the shisha bar and then meets Nadia inside.
His friend said Adam didn't bring the vehicle back. It seemed Adam was also missing.
So I'm like, oh my God, what if they got a car accident? What if something happened to him? Like, maybe they're both in danger. And then my, like, gut tells me, like, go to his house right away. I'm like, go to his house. Something is at his house.
His friend guided Rasha to Adam's home in northeast Calgary.
We get close to his house, and I see a cop car, and I don't think anything about it. And then we turn a corner, and that's where there's like the 10-15 cop cars, and I'm just freaking out. And the yellow tape, my mind is like going a mile a minute. I'm like, what is going on? Maybe the house got broken into and got robbed, and something happened to the both of them. Like, I don't know what's happening at that point. And I park the car, and I see a police officer, and I'm like, my sister's missing, their friend is missing. We want to know what's going on. He's like, well, who are you? I'm like, I'm Nadia's sister. Like, we haven't heard from her since yesterday. What is going on? Then somebody behind me walks up, and he's like, hey, like, what are you doing here? And I'm like, I'm looking for Nadia. And he's like, oh, well, I'm a detective. Can you, like, please come with me to the side? And we all go, to the side of the alley, and he's just questioning us, like, what does Nadia look like? When was the last time you heard from her? Does she have any tattoos? Does she have any piercings? And I'm just like rambling all this information off, and I'm like, yeah, of course, this is what she looks like. And I'm going through my phone to show him a picture of her.
It wasn't until the officer told Rasha he was a detective with the homicide unit that she realized what had happened.
I pretty much just like scream and break down and fall to the ground, and I'm just in hysterics. Like, where is she? Like, first I was screaming, like, I want to go see her. Like, I don't care. I don't believe this. Like, I want to go see her. And of course they wouldn't let me. And I'm like, who did this? And I'm like, what about Adam? Like, where is Adam? And they're like, we don't know where he is.
Coming up, the disturbing news and a killer on the run. As investigators retrace the victim's final steps, they realize the killer is gone. We now return to Obsessed, the story of Nadia El-Dib.
After unknowingly coming across the homicide scene, Nadia's sister and friends were taken to police headquarters.
They made us all turn our phones off. Each one of us was put in a room and we were like questioned by the police. I was in the room for like an hour or two and the police officer comes in and they're like, we're 99% sure that the woman that we found was Nadia. And I remember I called my oldest sister and she answers the phone and I couldn't say anything and I'm like, I'm sorry. And she's like, no. And I'm just repeating like, I'm so sorry, over and over again. And then eventually like my mom overhears the conversation and I hear her scream in the background because she knew.
As soon as Russia called us and she say, yeah, that's Nadia body, and the police coming to our house and pick up us, it's like I'm get like shock. It's like I cannot talk. It's like, what's happened? Why? What the reason? And how the way she died? It's like we get shocked completely.
Homicide detectives were working to answer those questions.
Through timelining the movements of the victim backwards to the previous evening, interviewing everyone that was at the Shisha bar and those that had been around and with Nadia, and were able to tell us that Adam was there. We were able to determine that Adam Bedahar was very likely our suspect, and obviously the overwhelming fact that it was directly behind Adam's house where Nadia's body was found.
Originally from Algeria, Adam Bedahar was 21 years old and lived with his mother. CCTV from downtown Calgary showed Nadia left the Shisha bar with Bedahar in the vehicle he borrowed from his friend.
We then have the phone call between Nadia's friend and Nadia, putting her and Adam alone together in the vehicle en route to Adam's home in the northeast. And then there is further CCTV that captures the vehicle turning in to the alleyway in behind the Bedahar residence. So we're able to put a pretty tight timeline together there, or a consistent one, certainly, that puts Adam and Nadia together leading up to the time of the murder. You could see in the darkness two figures exit the vehicle out the passenger door. It appears Nadia is exiting out the passenger door. The driver exits the vehicle, believed to be Adam, determined to be Adam, goes to the rear of the vehicle and retrieves what is a high-powered rifle. There is blood smears on the rear seat where the high-powered rifle was, consistent with that. At that point, we believe that Nadia had already been stabbed over 40 times, her throat had been slit, and she was likely dying. She was then shot twice, as is shown by two muzzle flashes captured on CCTV. With the second one with Nadia on the ground, she was essentially executed by Bedahar.
Further CCTV showed that after Bedahar borrowed his friend's SUV, he went home before heading to the Shisha bar. Police believe that's when he retrieved his gun.
The rifle was obtained legally from a shooting range in the south of Calgary within 2 weeks of the homicide, along with the ammunition. Once we identified where the weapon was purchased, we were able to determine that Bedahar had actually shot off a number of practice rounds. I believe it was 40 practice rounds within the last couple of weeks before the homicide. In reviewing the CCTV video from the Shisha bar, it was eerie to watch Adam and Nadia together, Nadia having no idea the kind of danger she was in, and knowing at that point that Adam had a high-powered rifle already in the back seat of his vehicle. And it's my belief that this was very much a premeditated murder by Adam, which was planned if Nadia did not come around to his advances.
Sunday, a woman was found dead in the backyard of a home in Marlborough Park. And as Nancy Hicks reports, a Canada-wide warrant has been issued for his arrest.
Calgary police have issued a Canada-wide warrant for a 21-year-old man wanted in connection to this case. Adam Bedahar is now facing 1 count of first-degree murder. Investigators believe he may have fled Calgary in a dark blue 2004 Ford Explorer.
At that point, We knew that Adam was on the run, that Adam was in possession of a high-powered rifle, considered armed and dangerous, and we knew that he would become aware that he was wanted for her murder. You put all of those things together, and that's a dangerous situation.
Police were able to see Betahar used his bank card in Edmonton, about a 3 hours drive north of Calgary.
A detailed background of Adam showed that he had worked up north and was very familiar with some of the northern smaller towns, which turned our focus to that area, as we believed he would go somewhere that he was familiar with, and indications from banking and the cell phones were also pointing in that direction as well. We were disseminating information to every officer across both provinces, almost on the hour or more often than that. Tracking him was basically the top priority in terms of resources.
Unfortunately, the ability to track Betahar through his cell phone ended very quickly.
It didn't take that long for Adam to shut his phone down, which made tracking him exponentially more difficult. At that point, we really engaged closely with RCMP patrol members who were incredibly engaged in this manhunt.
There was one person who Betahar remained in contact with while on the run.
Mother's cooperation was key, as Adam did maintain communication with her during these days, and even though he had shut his phone down, he was making phone calls to his mom from various payphones. With Adam's mother's permission, we were able to track the usage of her phone and very quickly identify phone calls that were coming in from Adam to her and the locations they were made from. It was problematic because we were always a step behind him, always a few hours behind him, and he kept moving. We're pulling CCTV at those locations, trying to determine what any clothing changes, any appearance changes that he's made, trying to confirm what vehicle he's operating, if he's changing that, and trying anything that can give us an advantage.
The manhunt for Adam Betahar went on for days.
Adam had told his mother that he was not going to be taken alive. You combine that with all the other elements that we knew to be true, and I believe that Adam presented a grave threat to police officers across Alberta, potentially into BC if he had crossed, or whomever tried to arrest him. Anytime you have someone who's staring at life in prison, on the run with a high-powered rifle, that's about as high threat a situation as you're going to have.
Coming up on Crime Beat. With officers on high alert, a chance sighting leads to the scenario police were fearing. A manhunt for a killer and a life or death situation for the officers. We now return to Nancy Hixt.
4 days into the manhunt for Adam Betahar, he was spotted west of Edmonton near Evansburg.
On the morning of the 29th, I walked into the office just before 7 a.m. and my phone was already ringing at my desk, and it was the detective from Calgary. I had been aware of what had happened in Calgary because I got an email from my old detachment with regards to a bolo, and what that's called is a be on the lookout. So it was sent out Canada-wide, I believe, because a Canada-wide warrant had been issued, basically advising members and other police to keep an eye out for a blue Ford Explorer as well as the suspect.
Calgary police asked RCMP Corporal Brandon Tobin to track down CCTV from a gas station where Betahar made a phone call earlier that morning.
See, 5:44 in the morning. Basically, he pulled up to the gas pumps, he purchased some gas, he made some purchases inside the gas station and made a phone call using the gas station's landline. I sent the video to them for their investigation and then sent out a bulletin to the surrounding detachments to notify them that he had been seen in our area. And we did keep an eye out for this guy throughout the day. We talked to Fish and Wildlife and advised them, like, if you see this vehicle in the area, let us know.
Hours later, Corporal Tobin headed home after his shift.
I was on call, so I was in a police car, but I'm just, listening to music and driving home, and all of a sudden I see this blue Ford Explorer coming towards me, and I was like, oh, I wonder if that's the one. So I turned around and attempted to catch up. From what I can recall, he was at least doing 150, because I was doing over 200, and it took me some time to catch up to him. I had readied my patrol carbine at that point because something was telling me that this isn't right and this is probably the vehicle.
10-4, we're doing 140 heading towards Highway 22. Turning right towards Evansburg here.
Corporal Tobin finally caught up to the vehicle about 20 kilometers south of Evansburg. He was able to confirm it was the suspect's vehicle. Bedahar refused to pull over, and that's when a pursuit began.
You have to get guys called out, you have to get roadblocks set up.
The detachment commander, veteran RCMP Sergeant Brian Topham, was notified.
I grabbed my duty belt and soft body armor, and then I jumped in the police car and I headed to where they were on Highway 16, just west of Evansburg. Other detachments were contacted, neighboring detachments were contacted, and they kind of converged on Highway 16.
Each of the RCMP vehicles recorded dashcam video of the pursuit.
I just saw a sea of red and blue lights behind me. There must have been, I'd say, like 15 police cars behind me. 10-4.
Corporal Tobin can be heard calling out what was unfolding.
Take control, advise 4-5 is now primary in a fully marked unit.
We were basically going down the highway in a staggered box formation, and we would call in updates as Bedahar's driving pattern changed, the vehicle condition changed, the location where we were. That was my job, and that's why you hear me on the radio saying we're at this crossroad, we're here, and it's just a way of having members staggered and set up all the way up the highway in order to prevent traffic from flowing down.
Update for everybody, we're coming up on Range Road 112 right now. Current speed's just under 150 kilometers an hour.
Bedahar drove at incredibly high speeds up and down the highway and dodged 4 spike belts before finally
That's a hit on the spike belt. Get those spike belts out of the way, boys. Good job.
But that still didn't stop him.
He's bound determined to get away, or he wanted to. He drove that vehicle until it mechanically could not go any further.
I got there just as they were coming back west at one of the range roads that were west of Evansburg. And so I was able to find a crossover, and then I was in amongst the first batch of vehicles that were directly behind our suspect.
His tire is gone. It's rolling down on the shoulder. Just under 70 kilometers an hour. I don't know how much more of that vehicle is going to stay on the road. It's shaking pretty bad. He's still losing lots of parts, so it can't be much longer. He's got sparks and metal chunks going everywhere here now. He is down to 40 kilometers an hour, 20, 30, 30 kilometers an hour, 20 kilometers an hour. He is stopped. He is stopped. We're approaching.
So my goal at that time was to attempt to make contact with Bedahar, but I didn't have a chance. Because as I was putting my vehicle in park was when the first shot rang through Sergeant Topham's police car. And in the time it took for me to get to Sergeant Topham's police car, Bedahar had already put 3 rounds through that car. And I remember feeling the concussions from his barrel because it was sticking around the rear of the Explorer. I can remember feeling that pressure, the concussions of pow, and you feel it. And I remember seeing Sergeant Topham's vehicle kind of shake a little bit, and I was wondering what was taking him so long to get out of the car. So I had peeked around to the driver's side of his Tahoe because I was at the rear passenger side of his patrol car, and I could see Brian hiding behind the dash. And I went back to exchanging gunfire with Bedahar, and something told me to check on Sergeant Topham again, and that's when I saw him get hit.
I remember laying across the seat with my head towards the driver's door, and I swung the door open and looked down towards the back of the vehicle where Brandon was. That's where I knew I had to go. And I put my head out the door, and then a round came through the door at the driver's mirror and got me in the back left of my head. I remember losing consciousness for a second, and a strange thought entered my mind right away as soon as I was hit, because I felt the bullet hit my head, but it didn't hurt. And so I remember asking myself, I said, I wonder if dead people know they're dead, because it didn't hurt.
All I saw was his body hanging out of the driver's door, and his left arm was swinging. And it wasn't swinging like there was life to it, it was just dangling. And I could see the hole in the back of his head and just blood going all over the side of his patrol car door. I thought he was dead. I saw him die, in my opinion.
And then it started to hurt right away. And it's okay, you're not dead, but you got to get out of the vehicle. But I could still hear the rounds that he was shooting and hitting the truck. I couldn't see out of my left eye, and the amount of blood that was coming off from the bullet wound was partially blinding me in my right eye. And so I couldn't see, but I could hear the brass from Brandon's carbine hitting the pavement. And so then I dropped down onto the ground outside of the driver's door, and I crawled back to where he was. And I remember getting to him because I recognized his boots. I remember looking at my right eye and I said, okay, I made it because there's his boots. And then I passed out.
So we're still getting shot at, and bullets are still flying through, metal's flying everywhere from the vehicles getting hit. I remember getting sprayed in the side of the face. It's the two strangest feelings that I've ever had in my life, where I just watched my commander get shot in the head, and I think he's dead, and he looks dead to me, and then all of a sudden he's not. Because I couldn't believe what I saw, so when I went back to look at him again, he was crawling on the ground towards me, and he was still gushing blood and stuff. And when he got to the back, the whole idea of what I was doing is I was trying to see what kind of cut was on his head, so I was trying to feel it. And I can still remember like feeling his buzz cut hair and like all the blood squirting over my hand, and I'm trying to see if it's like what kind of injury it is. And that's when I yelled, like, get up here, get up here.
Brandon reached down, he touched my head, and then a big guy, one of our guys, and I didn't know until afterwards who it was, ran over and grabbed me while the bullets were still flying to pick me up and dragged me behind another vehicle that was there and put me down on the ground.
The member from Stony Plain, Jeff, ran up under fire, grabbed Brian, and then dragged Brian back to my patrol car, where they did first aid on him behind my patrol car while the shooting is still going on.
And then I was there for a bit while they were working on the bullet wound to my head. And then I remember saying I was getting cold, and they carried me to another police vehicle further away from where the shooting was.
Clear the air, 1033, officer hit, suspects down, we need ambulance here right away.
I remember laying on another member's lap for a while, and then a ground ambulance came, and I was carried over to the ground ambulance, and then STARS came, and I was loaded into the helicopter, and then I flew to the U of A.
In less than 75 seconds, Bedahar fired 10 rounds from his semi-automatic rifle. 11 officers returned fire, shooting a total of 202 rounds.
Coming up, as the officer fights for his life, investigators work to determine a motive for the killer's volatile actions. Welcome back. Hundreds of shell casings litter an Alberta highway after a shootout with a killer that left 2 officers wounded. Here's Nancy Hixt with the conclusion of Obsessed, the story of Nadia El-Dib.
With the firefight finally over, police surveyed the scene and found Bedahar dead from multiple gunshot wounds.
When you make that decision to discharge your firearm at somebody, like, that's some pretty heavy stuff. And that stays with you forever.
An independent investigation by the Alberta Serious Incident Response Team found Adam Bedahar presented a lethal risk and was shooting to kill, not just to provoke a police response. Both Sergeant Brian Topham and Corporal Brandon Tobin were hit in the shootout.
I felt something on my left shoulder back here. I remember it was hot and it was sharp and it was just like, whoa, and it made me straighten up a little bit. I went to the local hospital and got some x-rays, and turns out I had some bullet fragments in my right arm that are still there. They left them there just because they're too spread out and it would cause too much damage to remove them all. It's pretty hard to believe that I never met him before, never said a word to him, and neither did Brian, and he tried to kill us.
It's any cop's wife's worst fear, is that they come and tell you that your husband or your wife or whatever has been hurt, and you know, saying like he's been shot. The doctor said if your head had been up another millimeter or 2, the round would have probably come out of your left eye. And so he said, you remember saying you're lucky, because there wasn't much space for anything else other than exactly what happened, because like I said, the bullet hit the back of my head on the left side, and I must have got my head down just low enough that it went across my scalp to my skull for about 3 inches back to front. And on that day, there were at least a dozen more policemen, men and women, who ran forward to get me when the bullets were still flying, and they never hesitated. They didn't wait to, you know, to not jeopardize their lives. Like, they ran towards me when the bullets were still flying. And the guy that came and picked me up, he exposed himself to gunfire to get me. And none of them thought twice about it. They just did it.
1 week after she was killed, family and friends gathered to remember Nadia El-Dib.
Favorite memory? Her dance, her smile, her hug.
I miss her. I miss her as a friend. I miss like her sense of humor. I miss, I really miss like not knowing what she could have been. I think that's a big one. Like, she just wanted to do so much in life. Like, even though she was such a strong, independent woman, she wanted to get married. Like her, she wanted a family. She wanted to get married.
There would be no court case, no justice for Nadia. But detectives continued to investigate and shared details with her family. Text messages from Bedahar painted a picture of a man who was obsessed with Nadia.
The messages were full on just like emotional abuse, very much psychological, where 1 second he's like, I love you so much, baby. Like, I will give you the world, and I love you and I want to be with you. And then Nadia was the type of person that she would sleep until like 3-4 p.m. on a Sunday because she just loved to sleep. And so if she wouldn't answer, he would blow up her phone and start swearing and cussing, being like, you know, like calling her a bitch and calling her names and just, you know, like, why aren't you answering me, and accusing her of cheating on him. And she would just say, hey, like, I'm sleeping, like, I just woke up. So there was definitely that like extreme behavior of 1 second again, I love you, the next calling her names and being like, you're cheating on me, something is going on, and just this insecurity that was very evident in the text messages that they exchanged.
It's a senseless murder, and it's hard to imagine that Adam could be that possessive with someone that he really didn't appear to know all that well. I think he's obviously a disturbed young man with a lot of issues and a lot of control issues, and obviously insecure.
It's hard. It's hard. And we know what's happened to Nadia when the police show us all the detail. She fight for her last breath, fighting from him, trying to get away from him, run for her life. Nadia, she died as a brave queen.
Just weeks after Nadia was murdered, her family requested to meet with the RCMP officers who put their lives on the line to catch her killer.
Thanked them for risking their life just to have the justice and stop that guy for hurting somebody else.
It's unheard of. Like, we don't, like in my 40 years, no one, like, you'll get a phone call sometimes, or you get a card in the mail saying, okay, thank you very much, we appreciate what you did and stuff like that, but they actually were concerned about us, like genuinely concerned that we were okay.
I'll never forget the look in her dad's eyes.
Nadia's family and the officers still stay in touch. They share scars that will never heal.
I still can't believe that day happened, and it's 4 years later, and I think about it all the time. I don't take that highway to work anymore. The detachment chipped in on Nadia's anniversary of her death and sent flowers, right? So, never did that for any other victim, but I can't stop thinking about it.
I can tell you this, that physical injuries heal much quicker than the mental part of it, right? You end up having, or at least for me anyways, emotional episodes where for no reason you just start to cry. No reason at all. You could be watching a hockey game or listening to the weather on TV, and then suddenly you just start to cry. And so my wife has got really good at seeing the signs that that's going to happen, and so when that happens, and it happens fairly regular still, is she just walks over and we hold on to one another, and sometimes it lasts a couple of seconds, sometimes several minutes, and then when it's over, it's kind of like we just pick up and go on. How about them Oilers? Like, it has become part of who I am now.
Let me to where you are. A candlelight vigil marked the first anniversary of Nadia's death. Her family keeps her memory alive through a foundation called Nadia's Hope.
This is unfortunately, like, it can happen to anybody, and it's important to spot these red flags in the beginning.
I receive many personal messages, and especially from one person. I know her. She's in bad relationship with her boyfriend, and she sent me a message, tell me, I want to just let you know, Nadia saved my life.
On April 14th, 2022, Sergeant Brian Topham and Corporal Brandon Tobin received the Commissioner's Commendation for Bravery that recognizes outstanding courage in the face of dangerous circumstances. It is the highest honor that's bestowed by the RCMP. For more information about the foundation created in Nadia El-Dib's honor, you can visit nadiashopefoundation.com. I'm Anthony Robart. Thank you for joining us tonight on Crime Beat. Want more episodes of Crime Beat? Listen to the Crime Beat podcast now for free on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you find your favorite podcast. And for past episodes of Crime Beat, go to the Global TV app, visit globaltv.com, or check out our Crime Beat YouTube page.